Welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast. I am thrilled to invite a fellow traveler and a prolific picture book and middle grade author to our podcast today. Leah Henderson has traveled the world. She is a kindred spirit in her quest for stories, and she has done so many beautiful books that I can't wait to talk to you about today. Leah, welcome to the show, and I can't wait to go to South Africa with you later this year.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, I want to start by talking a little bit about your adventure in learning. Because I know that as a child, you traveled all over the place. You had a family, it sounds like, who was really into making sure that you saw a world beyond where you grew up. Can you tell us a little bit about those adventures and how they've shaped you as a writer and as an author?
Sure, absolutely. I think, there are certain blessings that you have in your life that you might not appreciate when they're unfolding. And so I'm very glad that my parents are still with me for me to be able to say thank you for this. But what it really is that when we were young, we lived in communities where a lot of people didn't look like us. And so you're going from the classroom, you're going to the TV set, you're going wherever it is out in the neighborhoods or in the community, and you're getting one story, one narrative of possibly who they think you might be, who, you are supposed to quote unquote be, whatever it might be. And so my parents understood very early on that it was important for us to see ourselves out in the world. While it was important to find us in a book somewhere if we possibly could, honestly, there weren't as many options at the time, but they were like, we can get in the car, we can get on a plane, we can get on a boat, we can walk, and we can find examples of ourselves out in the world. And so that was kind of my childhood in every way. They brought us to some of the most obscure places and I'm like, this was before internet. How did you even know this place existed? It might be some like tiny little house in the middle of nowhere, but some great thing happened there. And so that's how I started with story. That's how I started with just having an appreciation for the things that are possible, and the things that have been done already, and just, looking at yourself and saying there's just so much more out there. And there that also could mean there could be so much more to me.
I love that. And I know that, when I talk to my college students about the notion of windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors, thank you, Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. I always try to make sure she gets the credit for that when we talk about it. But there was a graphic that came out a couple of years ago that sort of showed the possibilities that children see and are presented with in picture books. And it's a pretty startling statistic because when you look, you see the white child at one end of the spectrum who can see himself as president or as an astronaut or as a pirate or, all of these different things on one end. And then at the far extreme was the indigenous child who had like a shard of a mirror of one story. And then everything else sort of fell in between.
Yeah.
And for me, that's such an alarming vision because we don't want to limit what people can see. And it sounds like your parents had a really good, they were locked in early on to showing you other possibilities than just the one that people wanted to typecast you into. How
Absolutely.
can we go about making sure that more possibilities are available to all children, no matter where they are, whether they've got folks like your parents or like mine who took us out and made sure we saw a bigger world?
Right. I think one of the things that we can actively do is support the writers who are telling those stories, right? Whether the students in your class have that makeup or not, it's important to share those stories because one thing that I learned just growing up, after we would come back from these places and then we'd go into class and they'd be talking about a story and we'd be like, but wait a second, we just went to such and such and such happened and even the teacher didn't know about it, right? so
Right.
so just exposure in that way, because then that sparks the curiosity. And for me, that's what really did it. My curiosity was sparked to say, well, what else is there then? If this is this, if this happened, if this wasn't shown but it did happen, what else isn't shown that has happened? And I think with kids who are naturally curious, when you just start opening up those doors and windows, they themselves climb through, step through, right? Peek around the corner. And they get excited to learn more, and they move outside of the space that they have been, I don't want to say necessarily born into, but the space that they're in, right?
Right.
Because you can be born into a space and it be flourishing, but there's still something around the corner. And it's just that excitement to go take a look and find out more. So I think the biggest is just to support the people who are doing the work, and also find out ways where you can widen the space, and encourage more people to tell those.
Absolutely. And whether you're a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, or a librarian, you've got the power to be able to hold space for other stories, for other perspectives, for letting kids find those connections
1,000%.
and supporting it. I love that. So let's talk a little bit about your books. I mean, I got really excited as I was looking through your catalog because I was thinking about all of the things that a teacher or a librarian could do with them, because you have just done some really amazing stuff in terms of illuminating stories that we don't know. Whether it's a day for remembering, whether it's Mamie on the Mound, Your Voice, Your Vote, Together We March. How do you go about deciding what story you want to tell?
It goes back to that curiosity, and just it, I'm one of those people that have 50 million things going on in my brain. And to figure out which story is the one that I'm going to dedicate that much time to, it just has to keep pushing at me in different ways and in different angles. And so for me, like for instance, with Together We March, which is about 25 different protest movements throughout history, it came to me because I stepped outside my door in Washington, D.C., and there are tons of protests happening here. And I just remember looking at the signs, and it happened to be a there were a lot of students out that day. And I just remember seeing all the signs, and I'm like cataloging them in my head. And then fast forward a couple months, there was a Google Doodle of the silent parade that happened in New York City. And I started thinking, people kept chiming in saying, wait, I didn't know about this. I'd never heard about this. And it made me curious about what other marches, what other moments, either have people not heard about, or that were so pivotal in other things happening, right? Because that parade, that silent march that happened with 10,000 African Americans walking down in streets of New York, Fifth Avenue, in complete and utter silence, it was the start of a lot of civil rights marches and protests. And so that's kind of where I go. I start asking myself questions, and the questions just keep tumbling out of me for the most part until I settle on, okay, this is the story that I'm going to try to figure out how to tell.
That's exciting. And it sounds like your natural curiosity takes you in a number of different directions. I mean, because you've got history certainly, but you've also got folk tales, and it sounds like you're currently tell us a little bit about the book you're currently working on.
Yeah, so I have a book coming out with Patty Lee Gouch that it's called I Am the River. And it is a story about the Boblo Island and the Boblo boats, which is in the Boblo Island is in Canada, but the Boblo boats start out in Detroit and bring travelers to Canada to this amusement park. And Patty is from that area. Patty used to be an editor at Philomel, the head editor at Philomel. And she wanted to remember a story about her childhood. But as she was doing research, she learned about this woman, Sarah Elizabeth Ray, this African American woman who was taken off the Boblo boats because she was Black. And it was a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and Thurgood Marshall brought it there. And it predated, Brown versus Board of Education. It predated Rosa Parks and the bus boycotts. And so it's an important story to learn. And again, it's always, for me, it's always about discovering things that are little known.
I love that. And it sounds like it's an exciting story, and you're working with a mentor to co-write this. Is that right?
Absolutely. She is. I had said to you earlier, she is one of those people on earth where they are so special. You're surprised that they've graced this earth and that you get to be a part of their world in some small way. She's just an amazing, amazing human being, but she's also a wealth of knowledge. And to work with her and Arthur Levine, it's like a pinch me kind of moment to see how their brains work and puzzle through things. It's been an honor and the biggest pleasure.
And I wish that if you're not watching this on video, I wish you could see Leah's smile right now because she is just grinning from ear to ear as she's talking about this. It's contagious.
Mhm.
That's super exciting. Now, I know that you have a chance to take your books and talk to kids about what you do. What is the most surprising thing about author visits when you go?
Oh my gosh. There are just so many different things about author visits that always surprise me. But one of the things that helps keep me doing the work, there are two things really. One is that kids think and see so far beyond what we even grasp for them, right? And so some of their questions, you might have had some jokey questions about, are you famous? Do you make this money? Like, what kind of car? All of these. And then a kid will come and ask something that has to change your whole perspective of how you're thinking. And you have to pause because you know that this might be the only time they hear that answer. And it might be coming from you, right? Or it's the kind of situation where if you're too flippant with the answer, it might shut them down from ever asking again, right? So those are the moments for me where I'm like, you've got to bring your game every single time at every single school. And it is a pleasure and it is an honor. But then the other thing that's just really amazing about it is to see their faces light up when you walk in the room and you know instantly that they're thinking, that can happen. I could be that person's doing it, right? And I know that from when I was young and we would go to these places and I would see this person walk in the room and I'd be like, they did that thing. And and it becomes real then, right? And so much can become real. And so a big word in my family is possibilities. And so it blares out when that happens.
I love that. And I love the notion of being able to light possibilities. And you're right. We never know what it is that we say or do that a kid might be picking up on or what they might be grasping, but we've got the power within us to open doors and to be present and hold space for them. And I think that's probably one of the most important things we can do as educators.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're going to be traveling to South Africa this year as part of a conservation trip with Wild Tomorrow. A lot of your work has been sort of with a more historical aspect. What drew you to this particular trip?
Well, the thing is, so I am a big, big traveler. And it is in my core. It is like just a part of my DNA. And a fellow art author, um, Barb Rosenstock, sent me an email and she's like, Leah, I don't know where in the world you are, but you need to put in an application for this because I think this is right down your alley. And I went over to the site and I looked at it and I was like, oh, yes, please. And so there was little question, but I think for me, um, there are so many things that I am passionate about, I am curious about, I am interested in. But one of the biggest ones is how we care for each other and how we care for our planet, right? And each other includes the animals, it includes the insects, it includes all the things. And so those are um, fundamental parts of how I think about any story that I approach. And so a trip like this with fellow are like creatives, like-minded creatives. Are you kidding me? It's going to be such a joy. And I, you don't know what's going to happen, but I know it's all going to be amazing.
That's sort of how I'm feeling too. I'm still pinching myself because I keep looking around the room going, how did I wind up in a room with all of these brilliant, amazing creatives? And I'm so excited to be able, as you said, to go and discover and kind of going in with a completely open mind because who knows what the adventures are going to be.
We have no idea. And as someone, when you travel a lot, even, you come back and you tell a story, it could have been a disaster at the time, but that story still holds so much heart to it for that journey, right? So even
Exactly.
if things go this way or that way, it's all part of the learning of it, the discovery of it, and I'm here for all of it. I'm here for all of it.
I love that. And this is not your first trip to South Africa.
Oh, it's not. It's not. I actually went with my family right at the end of apartheid. It was kind of like my parents called and were like, "All right, we've changed our plan. This is what we're doing. We're gonna spend a month in South Africa." And I was like, "We are? Really? We sure about that?" Because it was so close to when it ended. You don't change mindsets just because you say something is over.
Right.
And so for me as a young Black girl to go to this country where I was seen a certain way, even more so than, other places that I've traveled, it was a stark reminder of not just the privileges and opportunities that you have, but just the landscape of this world and kind of the conversations that are being had need to happen. And those kinds of things, they really shaped me. That trip really shaped me. We spent a month and we traveled across, we drove across the country and we stopped and saw friends and did all of these different things. And it was just eye-opening and will never be forgotten.
I was going to say, are there things that stand out from that trip that have sort of stayed with you through the years?
I mean, so many times we might pull up to a gas station and the gas station attendant would kind of stare at us in the car and they would be like, "Why are you here? Like, why would you come here? Why would you do this to yourself?" Kind of thing, when you have the opportunity to do so many other things. And my parents would often say, because they need to see it, they need to understand it, because you don't, people can give lip service about what certain things are or what you can do, but until you really are in a space, maybe you're not experiencing all the things. But there were times where I put a pair of sneakers that I wanted to buy on the counter in the store, and all of a sudden that counter was closed, right? When all of these other people, and then as soon as I walked away, it was open again. Or the people didn't want to clean our room. Like there were all of these different things that were happening, and they were honest, and they are part of what the landscape of this world is. And so it was, those are the things that stuck with me. But there are so many other things. The people were amazing. Seeing our friends, some of our friends who were exiled and could come back, and all of the parties and celebrations, all of that stuff. So I'm just excited to go back because I haven't gone back since then. So it should be a good time.
Well, and I'm going to be excited to ask you questions and see it through your eyes as well, because I've never been. And I think I was telling you before the conversation, the closest connection I had had was I was in college at the time. And I don't know to this day how I wound up in a room doing this interview, but it was just before apartheid. And it was a group of white Afrikaner businessmen. And it was very eye-opening for me because it illuminated for me a lot of the racism, but also the sexism that was involved.
Right.
And it was stuff that, as an 18, 19-year-old girl, I had been living in my bubble.
Yeah.
And I would say that was one of those first things that really pricked that bubble open for me and made me take a more critical look at the world I was living in. And so I'm going to be fascinated to sort of see the world through your eyes for 3 weeks.
Yeah, it should be a blast.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to be able to share what we learn in terms of stories with kids as well, because that's one of the things I found on my own travels is, not every kid has the opportunity to travel to South Africa or to Antarctica or Australia or the Amalfi Coast.
Right.
And when we can bring back stories, bring back the visuals, be able to share what we learn, we're helping to broaden that world a little bit as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not just for, the teachers as well, the parents, the librarians, everyone. There are so many different things that, as an adult, I'm like, I didn't know that, but I learned it in a picture book.
Yep.
So there's just so many wonderful, it's like a full circle thing for each of us in different ways.
Absolutely. One of my favorite humans that I didn't know about until I went to Antarctica. And it was because I got curious because on the wall in the ship, there were a bunch of mostly white male explorers that they had listed. There were a couple of women, and I had that same question of who else?
Yeah.
What else? What am I missing? And so I started going down this rabbit hole that I've been living in for like 3 years now, because I discovered this woman named Barbara Hillary.
Okay.
And she was the first African American woman to reach the North and the South Poles. And she did it at age 75 and 79.
Crazy.
And she was a cancer survivor. She's from Harlem. She never married, and she just sort of hit this point after she survived cancer in her 60s where she's like, I want to travel, I want to see the world, and I don't want to hang out with boring married people who are fighting all the time.
Yeah.
And so she fell in love with the idea of going where other African American women hadn't been yet.
That I love.
And it wasn't easy. It wasn't like I can put my credit card out and raise the $20,000 for this trip.
Right.
She had to like make phone calls and write letters and fundraise. And she was doing it from a position where she didn't have that kind of power, but she managed to make it happen. And I
That,
think about her when I travel. Her story has stayed with me, and it's one I really want to see. I'm working on it right now, but it's one I want to see make it to the
yeah.
light of day because it's just a story that people need to know.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think on every level, one of the things also that I think about a lot when you do have the opportunity to travel and kind of go outside of your comfort zones, the courage that it takes to do things. You don't like you're building courage in a quiet way almost. Like you don't realize it until somebody says you did that and you're like, yeah, why not? And you're like, wait a second and it does. It takes courage and it takes kind of some self-awareness. And I think when you place those people who are doing those things in stories for kids, they're like, wait a second, I could do that. That's building courage in different ways. And I think it's so important to do to find courage in the different pockets of our life.
And we need those stories and we need those supports, especially in a world that would like us to stay small.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. 1,000. That's like my little hummingbird. Exactly. That's 1,000%.
Tell us about the little hummingbird.
Yeah.
Share some about that story.
So the little hummingbird is the story of my heart. I think, people write stories for all kinds of different reasons. And the hummingbird was a story that I wrote for myself because I needed to hear it. I needed to hear what it was saying and what it was reminding me of. And so I was going like in the professional space, sometimes you should do this or you should be this or this should happen or and I felt like I was getting that over and over and over and over and over. And it was kind of like, am I not enough as I am? I'm willing to do the work to continue to better myself, but is what I'm saying not enough? And I remembered this fable that I had heard a long time ago. And I was on a plane coming back from Luxembourg or some random place. And I had been with friends who were super excited and about the work that I had out in the world. But I was feeling less than when I was sitting on the plane because of all of these other voices. Because as we know, those are so much louder than the people
Right.
cheering and supporting you. And I have an amazing support system. And so I was on that plane, and some reason that fable came back into my head, and I took out a napkin and just started writing. And it literally is about the smallest of us trying to do something that seems insurmountable, especially when voices of those who are larger than us tell us we can't. But the only thing that we can do is keep trying. And so that for me was like, Leah, flap your wings, girl, and just try. Like, just keep trying. And so that one, that is a story that every part of it, I wrote for myself because I needed to hear it. I needed to be reminded. And I also wanted to write a story that featured animals from all over the world. That was really big for me, and that got a little pushback from my publishers on it at first, but it was something that was important to me.
I love that. And that I'm going to encourage everybody to grab that book, and I'll drop a link to it in the show notes as well, because it is such a beautiful story. And it's one we all need to hear right now, because I think it can be really hard sometimes to feel that you're enough. And you're right. We can hear 1,000 voices telling us we're doing well, and that one voice derails us.
Yeah, it's true, and I think especially with kids, like you go into schools and sometimes it's the kid that's the jokester, the silly kid, or the one that's always in trouble, but they do have a question. And you already see the teachers kind of batting them down. The class is kind of like, oh, and it's like, but their voice is still important. Like they might be the jokester, they might be the clown, but to kind of discount that they have something to say is heartbreaking to me all the time when it
Yeah.
happens. And so I always try to be like, what you got for me, beautiful? What are you about to tell me? What are you about to ask me? And then you're in your heart and your head saying, "Oh, please, please, please don't be something silly." But at the same time, you wanna acknowledge that they're here. You want to see their space in the room. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think that's the joy of going in as an author or as the informal educator. The way I do it is we get a chance to see kids outside of the blinders that I think often accompany them day to day, because you're right. We tend to categorize kids as one thing, or, 180 days into the school year, you've heard this every morning
Yep.
for
Yep.
180 days. And it sometimes takes somebody from the outside to
Absolutely.
remind you that this
Absolutely.
child is special and this child has something to say. And you just have to go beyond the
And I mean, it's also a reminder for me as well, right? To not discount. Um,
right.
I think it works. I think it works both ways because when you are in the trenches with these kids, you have to set some boundaries.
Absolutely.
But it's also for me to say, okay, how can you step into this space and make it so that you're not pushing against, but you're also opening up, right? And so it's
Yes,
also something to be mindful of because we don't always get it right either. And so
not at all.
it's definitely something that helps me continue to be aware, and be aware of the space that we take up in these rooms.
And it's space that we take up in all of our lives. I mean, it
Yeah,
applies to our adult lives outside of a classroom as well. That,
absolutely.
there are times where we don't realize that we have put people into categories, or that we've
Absolutely.
sort of done our own
Hmm.
partitioning out, or that we come in and we're like, I'm going to take over this space now. And it's a good reminder just about how you live and how you breathe with other people.
1,000%, 1,000%.
So, last question for today.
Okay.
What brings you hope?
Oh my goodness, so many things bring me hope. I think for me, the biggest thing that brings me hope, I'm gonna, since we've been talking about travel and stuff, when you go away and you sit down on a train or you're on a bus or you're on a boat or you're on a camel or wherever, and there is someone from a totally different world space than you, and you can just sit in community and have a good time. And whether you are in agreement or not, there is a bonding that's forming. And that gives me hope that even with all of this that's going on, all of the pounding and disagreements and all of the trying to do better than or this, that, and the other thing, my hope is that at our core, when we kind of can sit around in those spaces, when we're traveling like that, especially, and let down those walls and have just these genuine conversations, that brings me hope. That brings me hope for more, right? So that when we step off of those spaces, we go do more with what we learned.
I love that. And I cannot wait to step into those spaces with you, Leah. Thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you again for having me. It's been so wonderful to spend some time with you before our big trip.